I analyzed Iron Man's ridiculous net worth to see just how much money he really has, putting both the research skills I obtained from my science degrees and many years of being a teacher to good use, so I can answer these fun questions. The amount of cash that Tony has just sitting in the bank is estimated to be somewhere in the high tens of billions, with that number skyrocketing when we take into account the value of everything he owns, like his Iron Man suits. Because to measure the amount of money that someone like Tony Stark really has, we have to define his total net worth, being the value of everything he owns if it was to be liquidated or converted into cold hard cash, minus any outstanding debts he may owe for blowing up buildings and making technology that levels entire cities. Calculating Iron Man's true net worth leads us to start with the two biggest items on the list of Tony's personal assets, being his famous Iron Man suit and the arc reactor technology that he used to power all of his new inventions. In the MCU, Tony has reportedly invented 85 different Iron Man suits, some being upgrades of others, while others are specifically used for different purposes and to deal with specific threats, like his Thor Buster armor. And each of these things are so advanced in not only their weaponry, but also in their design and function for their time, that each of them ranges well above the price required just for the specific materials to make one. In fact, when asked why Tony won't sell off any of his armors or designs to the military in the comics, Tony mentions it's because not only could they not even afford to make one of their own if they had a blueprint, but the military and by extension the US government couldn't afford to outright buy one of his earlier armors from him directly. It makes sense that Tony has then said to fellow Avengers that he decides to keep all of his old armor for sentimental reasons and practicality, in that they cost so much to make and have such a high value that he just can't get rid of them and throw all that money away. If we do look at the total cost for a suit like the earlier suits that we see in the Avengers film with the Mark VII, the cost of the surrounding shell or exoskeleton for the suit being made out of a gold titanium alloy would cost around $10 million. His shoulder-mounted anti-personnel guns cost around $400,000, his wrist-mounted anti-tank missile launchers cost a minimum $1.5 million, with his wrist laser costing around $1 million, his back and shoulder-mounted wings or ailerons that he can use to control lateral balance being worth $2 million, along with his hand-mounted stabilization jets that also fire his repulsor blasts, while his boot-mounted repulsor jetpacks are worth $3.8 million, with the most expensive and technologically advanced part of the suit being his helmet with its unique projected holographic HUD display being worth a whopping $54 million. This is along with other weapons and devices like flares that he likes to include in his suits that would add on anywhere from $1 to $4 million more dollars. The parts for the suits alone would cost around $76.7 million. However, putting it all together in one package, the price of the suit has been said to be around $1.5 billion, with later suits being said to be at the lowball price of $7 billion. That is, if the suits were comprised of technology that everyone, like the US government and other corporations, knew how to even make. So technically, if the technology was public knowledge, but it's not, which drastically ramps up the value for one of these suits if Tony was to turn one into cash. Going off of what Tony said about not being able to sell one of them to the US military, with the Department of Defense's entire annual budget being around $2 trillion, that is then divided between 6 subdivisions to support things like the various military branches and paying companies like Stark Industries for government contracts, and who knows what off-the-book projects are going on, they reportedly still have 54% or just over $1,091 million left to spend on other things like an Iron Man suit. Well, it's hard to believe that one of these, even his later suits, could somehow be valued at more than 54% of the Department of Defense's budget. Let's remember that the technology for a suit is so far ahead of its time that without a suit and various technological blueprints that Tony holds to be priceless, no one on Earth can make an Iron Man suit like Tony's for any dollar amount. They simply just can't make the technology. Which brings us to possibly Iron Man's greatest invention, the arc reactor. Simply put, the arc reactor reactor is a fusion reactor, compressed down to a miniature scale, whose energy source is, in a sense, endless in terms of just how much high-energy power it can produce. This revolutionary technology remains possibly the sole reason why countries around the world are unable to build any sort of Iron Man suit complete with its own flight capabilities at all. But if the technology for the arc reactor was public information today, the cost to build one of these suns in the palm of your hand would range around $36 million. If you wanted to live in a house as cool as Tony Stark's Malibu home, complete with holographic displays on the windows, and then sell it for cold hard cash, Tony's house would add an additional $125 million to his net worth and cost the new owner $10 million a year to keep running, with property taxes hitting them for another $900,000. Then on the other hand, Tony's lakeside house that we see in Endgame costs around $5 million. Beyond Tony's houses, we see him drive a variety of really expensive luxury cars, among an even larger variety of well-placed Audi ad placements. Adding up the cost of all the cars we see Tony drive and own across the MCU, we can estimate that his car collection costs around a measly $5 million. But we can add in Tony's private jet that costs him $65 million to own, but really by far Tony's most expensive vehicle that he uses to shuttle the team around the world is the Avengers Quinjet, an extremely mobile stealth plane with state-of-the-art everything. That would cost him $2.5 billion per jet. Not to mention that Tony has actually paid for many of the Avengers super suits, with Spider-Man's suit costing him around $16 million, the Iron Spider being another $7 billion Iron Man suit, Captain America's range of suits adding an additional $40 million, Black Widow and Hawkeye taking just $1 million each, with the Incredible Hulk costing a whopping $1,000 for each of his super lab invented stretchy jeans. But his home and car collection pales in comparison to the cost of the Avengers Tower, and eventually the Avengers' new base in upstate New York. Stark Tower is a high-rise building consisting of 93 floors of pure ego, rendered in glass and steel, is run entirely on clean arc reactor energy, and comparing its price after construction to buildings like the Freedom Tower that's built on the former site of the Twin Towers, Stark Tower runs around $5 billion. After selling the building and its automated systems to make the greatest Starbuck building of all time, the new Avengers complex sits on over 100 acres of land, has several warehouses for storage of some incredibly expensive toys, a lab pool, screening room, minibar, and space for a quantum time machine, running it close to $1 billion. And what the heck, let's just throw an extra $1 billion on for the time machine. Still winding up for Tony's massive asset of Stark Industries that, if it's anything like Wayne Enterprises, may literally run the planet. Tony's artificial intelligent Jarvis and later Friday that controls buildings, his suits, workshops, and part of his company would cost roughly $10 million each to have. With the energy bill required to run these guys, along with all of Tony's other assets, would easily cost him over $500 million a year. But not to worry, as all of Tony's assets remain just a meager portion of his wealth when we look at his multi-international company Stark Industries. Cause after the Wayne Enterprise research fiasco of, my gosh, calculating exactly how Bruce Wayne literally owns and runs the entire freaking planet, Stark Industries is just a monster. Unlike Bruce Wayne, Tony Stark seems to be the sole owner of all of Stark Industries, as it's not a publicly owned company, and the company, rather than acting like a Walmart only selling goods and services to the masses, instead deals in, what do you know, creating and selling technologies that no one else can even begin to make. Stark Industries is a global aerospace defense, security, and advanced technologies corporation that, while no longer selling weapons to militaries, as it was founded for in World War II, has its hand in aeronautics, robotics, microtechnology, nanotechnology, farming and medical technologies, construction and land development, artificial intelligence, clean energy, with the largest worldwide shipping business, and acquired damage control branch. Being modeled after Lockheed Martin, Stark Industries also builds all of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s equipment as their sole contractor, which includes its, at minimum, $20 billion per helicarrier and all of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s mini Quinjets, armor, and weapons. It's likely that Stark Industries built the staffed and most, if not all, of the prisons to house supervillains, and this appears to be the one and only situation that Tony sees fit to give the poor guards responsible for guarding villains like Carnage versions of his Iron Man suit to wear at all times. Basically, much like his counterpart Bruce Wayne, Stark Industries and eventually Stark Enterprises is a terrifyingly powerful organization with its hand in being the leader of almost every major honeypot there is. So exactly how much is Stark Enterprises actually worth if Tony was ever to decide to liquidate all of it as an asset? Well, if the company was ever to exist, it would absolutely be the largest, most profitable corporation in the world. Calculating the cost of a fictional company with a monopoly in futuristic technology is no easy task. So to get a more realistic ballpark answer, we're going to compare Stark Enterprises to all of its top real-life counterparts, with companies like Lockheed Martin being worth nearly $119 billion and NASA being $71 billion, and adding up the worth of a whole lot of other top-performing companies in their respective fields. An estimated value of Tony's company as a whole is found to be around $307 billion. But it gets even better. If Tony was to liquidate all of his Iron Man suits from his long list of 85 iron suits, with each suit costing just the price to build it if the technology was readily available, being the estimated $7 billion each, this would give Tony an additional $595 billion. Then adding up the combined value of every asset Tony owns and turning it into the cold hard cash it's worth, we find that Tony Stark's entire net worth is $917,814,007,000. But if none of this was very interesting, then I saved my most interesting fact for last. Iron Man's company may be worth a lot of money, but it still remains significantly smaller and less powerful than the world-running behemoth that is Wayne Enterprises that we go over in this video of Batman's ridiculous wealth. See you in the next one.